Picture yourself settling into a comfortable chair, maybe with a warm cup of coffee or tea by your side, ready to hear one of those larger-than-life stories that seem plucked straight from the swirling heart of the American music scene. That's the feeling I want to evoke for you now as we take a deep dive into the life of Jackie Wilson. He was a dynamo on stage, brimming with emotion, dancing like there was electricity wired right into his bones and leaving his audiences gasping for breath. Some called him Mr. Excitement. Others described him as the embodiment of soul itself. For many, he was one of the single greatest vocalists of his era, bridging the realms of R&B, pop, and gospel, forging new paths for black entertainers in a rapidly changing world. Yet for all that star power and pure energetic joy he poured out on stage, Jackie Wilson's life off stage was complicated. This is a tale filled with triumph and heartbreak of someone whose voice rose up from humble beginnings in Detroit, soared to the top of the charts, and then met with a fate so tragic and unthinkable that it still breaks hearts decades later. Jackie Wilson was born on June 9th in 1934 in Detroit, Michigan. Born Jack Leroy Wilson Jr., he was raised at a time when social barriers were towering. It was not easy for African Americans to reach wide acceptance or financial stability. And for those with showbiz dreams, there was still rampant segregation in theaters, radio programs, and record labels. Jackie's parents recognized pretty early on that this boy had a special spark. He was their only child, though some accounts mention half-siblings from his father's side. So a lot of attention fell on little Jackie's shoulders. He grew up in a rough neighborhood known as the North End, where survival took grit, quick reflexes, and, if you were lucky, a supportive community of kin and friends. Instead of letting the tough environment break him, Jackie used his talent to rise above it in his own way. He was singing almost before he could form sentences properly. Neighbors would note that he could hold a tune better than many adults. By the time he was 6 or 7, he'd belt out gospel hymns in a voice that could stop passers-by on the street. He also had a knack for dancing. One story claims that even as a boy, Jackie put on little shows on his front stoop, enthralling local kids, and occasionally collecting small coins from amused adults. Even then, though, the streets carried many dangers. Gangs, poverty, and limited educational opportunities often stood in the way. Jackie dropped out of high school, an unfortunate but common path for young people at the time who saw little value in formal schooling when immediate work or hustling might bring in money for the family. He began performing in local talent shows, sometimes around Detroit, sometimes venturing to areas where he'd find clubs that dared to let a minor step onto their stages. One rarely mentioned anecdote is that Jackie initially tried to form a small gospel quartet with a couple of neighborhood friends. They performed on Sunday mornings at local churches, hoping to catch the ear of a congregation. The group didn't last long. Personal disagreements and a lack of stable adult guidance saw to that, but it was an early sign of Jackie's hunger for the spotlight. By the early 1950s, a fervent shift was taking place in popular music. White teenagers were discovering rhythm and blues from African American communities, and some entrepreneurs were racing to rebrand it as rock and roll. Jackie found himself caught right in that swirl of cultural change. He landed a spot with a doo-wop group, the Falcons, for a short time, but it was after he joined Billy Ward and his Dominoes, replacing the iconic Clyde McPhatter, that Jackie's trajectory really took off. Think about it. You're a young performer stepping in to replace a well-loved powerhouse singer. That's enough to daunt almost anyone. Yet Jackie's distinctive voice and flamboyant stage presence quickly won over the Dominoes fan base, and that transition was more than a test of nerves. It was proof that Jackie Wilson had a singular gift. With the Dominoes, Jackie spent a couple of years honing his craft, learning to handle touring schedules, perfecting his stage moves, and seeing firsthand the harsh realities of the music business. It was a life on the road, often traveling hundreds of miles each week, performing in segregated venues in the Jim Crow South, occasionally sleeping on the bus when hotels refused to serve a black band. But Jackie took those experiences and grew. Fellow musicians noted that he never seemed to complain. Instead, he soaked up every moment, using it to refine his vocal techniques and perfect the showmanship that would soon become legendary. The turning point came in the late 1950s when Jackie decided to break away and pursue a solo career. He was ready to be his own star, not just a sideman or a fill-in for someone else. That decision was gutsy because the mid to late 50s were an era of intense competition. Elvis Presley, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, and others were all vying for the top. But Jackie, with his immaculate suits, suave style, and magnetizing eyes, quickly found a space of his own. He teamed up with a young songwriter named Berry Gordy Jr., the same Berry Gordy who would later found Motown. Gordy penned a few hits for Jackie, including Reet Petite, Lonely Teardrops, and To Be Loved. These songs not only showcased Jackie's phenomenal vocal range, but also tapped a mainstream audience. Jackie was bridging the gap between R&B and pop in a way that allowed him to transcend color lines, at least on record. Sometimes in interviews, he would speak with pride about how his mother and father had taught him that it was possible to entertain anyone. He wanted to be loved by everyone, no matter their background. An often overlooked detail is just how supportive Jackie was toward young Berry Gordy. Gordy was struggling financially at that time, and Jackie's success with his songs helped put Gordy on a firmer path. There's even a story that Jackie once suggested Gordy ask for an advance on royalties so he could keep writing, with Jackie offering to help out because he saw Gordy's potential. While Gordy would soon go on to found Motown and work with Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, and the Supremes, Jackie's early patronage left a lasting impression. Later in life, Gordy would credit Jackie Wilson as one of the key inspirations behind the whole Motown concept, bridging soulful African-American music with crossover pop appeal. Back in the spotlight, Jackie quickly racked up hits. Reet Petite found a keen audience in the UK. Lonely Teardrops soared in the US. And That's Why I Love You So kept him on the charts. If you'd stumbled upon one of his live shows back then, you might have thought you were seeing a literal force of nature. Jackie's voice would glide from a tender, heartbreaking falsetto to a deep, throaty belt. And then between lines, he would moonwalk across the stage or fling himself into a perfect spin. His sense of rhythm and dance was second to none, and fans often remarked that after a Jackie Wilson show, they left both sonically impressed and visually dazzled. In a sense, he personified show business. Amid all this rising fame, Jackie's personal life was anything but smooth. He was married multiple times with swirling rumors of affairs and romantic entanglements. He fathered children by different women, and his relationships were often volatile. One rare piece of conversation that's circulated among old-time music insiders is about how Jackie quietly tried to make amends for his chaotic personal affairs. Though the press loved to highlight the drama and occasional violence in his private relationships, he apparently had some heartfelt moments where he tried to be present for his kids, even if he struggled under the weight of touring and an intense performing schedule. The 1950s and 1960s were not an era in which public figures had the same support systems or image management teams that celebrities have today. Jackie was juggling stardom, personal demons, and the burdens of financial obligations on multiple fronts. In the early 1960s, Jackie's career soared even higher. Tracks like Baby Workout and Night blasted from radios nationwide. He played clubs in Las Vegas, major auditoriums, and even made appearances on mainstream TV shows. though it wasn't as easy for a black performer to secure prime TV spots. His stage shows, complete with backup dancers and carefully choreographed routines, drew comparisons to the older generation of R&B showmen, like the theatrical talents of Louis Jordan or the comedic brilliance of Sammy Davis Jr., but Jackie's style was distinctly his own, energetic, warm, often flirtatious, and laced with a voice that could melt hearts. He not only delivered the notes, he performed them, stepping into them with a dancer's grace, riding the rhythms as though they were waves carrying him across the stage. Yet behind the curtain, there were controversies stirring. One centered on money. Many artists in that era signed contracts with record labels or management that were exploitative. Jackie was no exception. Despite his enormous success, it seemed he was not receiving royalties in proportion to his record sales. Large sums disappeared into the pockets of managers, promoters, and label executives. Another simmering controversy, rarely talked about publicly, was whether Jackie Wilson was overshadowed by the massive popularity of Elvis Presley. In private circles, Jackie seemed to have an amused acceptance of Elvis's star power. Some accounts even say Elvis himself once told a group of friends that, "If I could sing like Jackie Wilson, I'd never want to be the king." Though whether that's an exact quote or a paraphrase remains debated. The deeper point is that Jackie was widely respected by his peers as a performer's performer, someone who could outsing almost anyone. But the mainstream press, shaped by racial biases, often gave more coverage to white rockers, leaving Jackie's achievements less recognized among the broader public. By the mid-1960s, the music landscape was transforming. Motown had exploded, the Beatles arrived with the British invasion, and the entire pop culture world was swirling with new sounds. Psychedelic rock, folk soul, you name it. Jackie adjusted to these waves as best he could. He was no longer the fresh-faced star of the late 50s, but a respected R&B veteran. He continued to release records, some with moderate success, and to play regular gigs. Unlike some older artists, Jackie still had a following and was widely admired for his unstoppable energy. He adapted in small ways, occasionally updating his look or adding new flavors to his stage show. But that restless desire to entertain never went away. By some accounts, he even developed routines that included comedic interludes, cracking jokes with the band, playing with the audience's expectations, and then unleashing that fiery vocal talent. Tragedy, however, was never far behind. One well-known incident occurred in 1961 when Jackie was shot by a woman rumored to be a crazed admirer or possibly a girlfriend. Versions differ. He nearly died. The bullet managed to damage organs, and doctors had to do extensive surgery. Although he survived, his road to recovery was long and painful. The press spun the story in sensationalist ways, sometimes painting Jackie as a troubled star entangled in dangerous affairs. Jackie himself was notoriously private about it. He had a certain code. What happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. That near-death experience did not slow him down much, though. He hopped back on the stage as soon as his health allowed, determined to prove that music was his life's calling, and no bullet wound was going to stop him. Another lesser-known personal anecdote from around that period reveals a tender side. During the height of his post-shooting recovery, Jackie supposedly snuck out of the hospital late one evening, bandages still on, because he wanted to attend a small Detroit club where a close friend was performing. This friend had supported him when he was a struggling teenager. Jackie wanted to return the favor by cheering him on from the audience. Security found him before he made it all the way out, and he was ushered back to his room. But the staff said Jackie kept repeating that music and loyalty meant more to him than his own comfort or personal safety. He just wanted to do right by his friend. These small acts of devotion show how complicated Jackie was. Flamboyant on stage, sometimes embroiled in controversies, but fiercely loyal in certain relationships. As the 1970s dawned, musical tastes had shifted dramatically once again. Funk, disco, and more politically charged soul music were emerging. Jackie, now in his late 30s and early 40s, was still performing relentlessly, though his commercial heyday was largely behind him. He'd pop up on oldies tours or share stages with younger acts that admired his legacy. He seemed content to do what he loved most, give crowds a show they would never forget. But the toll of that lifestyle, alongside years of financial mismanagement, became more apparent. He occasionally had run-ins with the law over unpaid child support or tax issues, debts mounted. He scrambled to keep the money coming in. Some old acquaintances said Jackie was tired, yearning for a quieter life, but also unable to imagine himself not performing. The stage was his identity. Then came that fateful night on September 29th, 1975. Jackie was performing at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, as part of a Dick Clark review show. Early in the set, while singing Lonely Teardrops, Jackie collapsed. Some in the audience initially thought it was part of his stage act, but it wasn't. He'd suffered a massive heart attack, which led to him hitting his head against the stage with terrible force, damaging his brain. His friend and fellow performer Cornell Gunter reportedly rushed to his side, realizing something was terribly wrong. Jackie was taken to the hospital, but he slipped into a coma. For months, fans prayed for him to recover. The fact that it happened while he was singing Lonely Teardrops, one of his greatest hits, added a haunting twist to the tragedy. The emotional punch of that moment, someone who poured so much soul into his performance suddenly struck down, remains one of the most heartbreaking chapters in music history. Yet Jackie held on, though not in a conscious way. He never recovered full brain function. He remained in a semi-conscious state for over 8 years. Friends, family, and fans visited him in the hospital. Stories floated around of how someone would come and sing one of Jackie's old hits, or hum a gospel tune at his bedside, and for a moment his eyes might flutter, or a slight smile would form at the corner of his mouth. Small signs, perhaps, that his spirit still recognized the music. Medical professionals, however, deemed it extremely unlikely that he had any substantial awareness. Financially, it was a nightmare. Jackie's estate was unprepared for such long-term care. Bills soared. His once robust fortune had been siphoned off by shady managers, and now he was essentially penniless. There's a rarely discussed debate about just how well Jackie was cared for during those final years. Some family members maintained that he was constantly visited and looked after. Others alleged that he was moved between facilities, sometimes in less than ideal conditions. Whichever version is closer to the truth, it's clear that this proud, brilliant star lived out the end of his life in a tragic haze, relying on others to meet even the simplest needs. He died on January 21st, 1984, at the age of 49, leaving behind a legacy that still resonates in the very foundations of soul and pop music. The controversies surrounding Jackie's life extend beyond his personal misfortunes. Historians still debate his place in the pantheon of rock and roll greats. Some argue that if he had received the same level of promotion and financial backing as Elvis Presley, or had been as savvy a businessman as James Brown, Jackie might have become a household name worldwide, revered for generations. Others note that his complicated personal life, including rumors of violence and mismanagement, might have stunted the mainstream adulation that many of his peers enjoyed. But is that the whole story? Perhaps the deeper truth is that Jackie Wilson was a man of extraordinary gifts and equally extraordinary vulnerabilities. Someone who could channel entire lifetimes of emotion into a single note, yet struggled to manage the everyday realities that came with success. One of the lesser known but emotionally striking facts near the end of his life, as medical bills soared, a group of musicians quietly banded together to raise funds for Jackie's care. He'd given so much inspiration and passion to the music scene that they felt it was only right to support him in his time of dire need. Despite these efforts, there was a certain heartbreak in acknowledging that a man who had once thrilled crowds with million-selling hits needed help simply to afford proper medical treatment. This remains a sober reminder of how ephemeral fame can be, and how the music industry has often failed to protect its greatest talents. Another poignant detail is how, after his death, Jackie was buried in an unmarked grave at first, an indignity suffered by many African American performers who died broke or underappreciated. Only later did fans and supporters gather enough resources to give him a proper headstone. And for many who see that stone now, it's both a testament to his monumental achievements and a stark symbol of how cruel the industry can be. But Jackie's presence lives on in every heartfelt cover of Lonely Teardrops, in every recollection by older fans of a concert that left them floating on air, and in the countless tributes by young artists who still see him as a gold standard of vocal prowess and stage magic. If there's a lesson or moral takeaway, maybe it's that greatness in the arts doesn't come neatly packaged. It's often tangled with life's sorrows, heartbreaks, and moral complexities. Yet that very rawness can produce the most transcendent art. Jackie Wilson's voice was a testament to that principle. From the darkest corners of heartbreak, he could conjure a rapturous note that made the audience tremble with delight. His downfall, slow and painful, might prompt us to question how we treat our heroes, how we remember them, and how we ensure that such tragedies don't repeat. But for all the sorrow in his story, Jackie Wilson still shines as a beacon of possibility, a working-class kid from Detroit who wrote himself into music history through relentless creativity and a genuine love for performing. May we hold him in our memories not just for his tragedies, but for the way he spun around on a stage with a microphone in one hand and the rapture of the crowd in the other, turning every lyric into a soulful confession. He brought excitement, joy, heartbreak, and resilience to millions. And even though Mr. Excitement is gone, every time someone turns up one of his records and starts swaying along to that glorious voice, Jackie Wilson's spirit blazes anew. For as long as there are people searching for a musical spark that resonates deeper than mere entertainment, Jackie Wilson's story and artistry will remain a testament to the enduring power of song.